What is your training philosophy? Someone new to me recently asked this, and overall, I think you should lift heavy, progress almost every week, and have an intentional program that aligns with your shape goals. But what does that actually mean? What does that look like every day? And what are the nuances you need to consider? And that is what I'm diving into in this episode, specifically for ladies who want to look like they lift weights. So let's get into it. And if you didn't see our announcement, we're having a baby boy. We are due in December. I am about 14 weeks now, and it's been so hard keeping this a secret, but I'm super excited to finally tell everybody, and we're just, super excited to be in this next chapter, in this next phase of life. I'll probably share a lot more on this, maybe even do an episode, but basically, I was pregnant for about 1 to 2 months while we were living in Bali, and I felt great. And then month 3, we moved here, and I'm sure with the altitude change, it didn't help, did not feel good. I was horizontal for like 80% of my days. And then the past handful of weeks, I've gone back to feeling great. The one major change that I've noticed is my appetite. I have never been this big of a foodie. Like, there are moments where I'm like, I need to have tacos right now. And luckily, I know enough to know that I don't want to eat out that much. And so I will immediately go to the store and get all the things to make my own tacos at home, which has been fun because I've turned into a little bit of a chef and everything tastes delicious and it's amazing. However, it definitely has made me experience what maybe some people who are foodies or have a higher drive for food feel like, and how to manage that. So I'll be sharing more about that too. And then even with all that in going forward, I'm still working and I am really enjoying it. Right now I'm prepping for the July Create Your Shape class. It's getting started at the end of July. This is my 4-month nutrition coaching program for ladies who want to look like they lift weights, because they do. If you are curious about that, then if you sign up by the end of June, you do get $200 off. So you can go to the link in the show notes or jennythenutritionist.com/create-your-shape to learn more and get signed up. And then I also have been working with my one-on-one clients. And so this is the same type of person, but just really has desire for direct one-on-one higher touch coaching, which I'll explain a little bit about both when I talk about my training philosophy. But I have a few spots open for that, which if you are interested, you can send me an email. It is jenny@jennythenutritionist.com, and I can give you all the details and we can make sure it's a good fit for you. All right, let's get into my training philosophy. So basically, I'm going to go over the top 3-ish things I would consider for the actual program, and then the top 3-ish or so things to actually make it work. So as far as it comes to like a training program, if you want to build muscle, you want to be on a training program that targets muscle growth and is specific for muscle growth and not performance. So most of us don't know that there is a difference, and basically what I'm suggesting is a progressive overload training program, and that's kind of a style of training programs that if you Googled, you'd see a ton of programs that fall under that. Now, what does that actually mean, and why do we want this? So there are certain exercises that are more performance-based. So if you were doing super low reps, like 1 to 3, or if you are doing things that are more skill-based, like handstands or dancing, right? Those aren't designed to optimally build muscle. So I'm going to explain more what this exactly looks like, and then I'll give examples of what this is not. So first, the program should include isolated exercises for the muscle you want to build. So this could be using dumbbells, this could be using barbells, this could be using machines. There is a variety of exercises. Of course, some are going to be more effective or more efficient than others, but that also depends on your equipment access, and it also depends on your experience and what you can perform. So there's nuance within that too. and you can graduate. And I suggest doing that. A lot of my ladies, I have 3 tiers specifically in my program based on equipment access, but also based on what you're familiar with. And then as you improve, as you understand it more, you can progress to what's going to be the next most effective thing. So a good example of this is back in the day, I really wanted to grow my glutes, but I was not doing exercises that were going to grow my glutes. And I was doing like squats here and there, and squats could help, but it's not going to be the most effective. So now I do specifically hip thrust, glute bridges, like leg presses, Bulgarian split squats, like all these specific exercises in my training program to grow my glutes. And so, for example, the Create Your Shape training program is full body, but we have exercises in there that are specifically targeting glute growth and shoulder growth, along with secondaries like a emphasis on back and legs. And then we touch full body. So that's the first thing there. The second thing with the training program is you do the same exercises every week. So they repeat every week. So if you do the hip thrust on Monday, the next Monday, you're also going to do the hip thrust. This is such an important part of progressive overload because with the name of it, in order to progress and grow that muscle, you have to be creating consistent stimulus and growing or lifting heavy or progressing that movement to ensure you are building muscle. So this is, again, why I say it's the most optimal way to build muscle, which that's what we're trying to do. We're not just trying to like have more fun in a training session, although I think it is more fun when you do it this way, but we're also not trying to just get our lungs out of breath, and we're also not trying to like kick a soccer ball better, because those are all like performance or endurance, where we're focused on building muscle. All right, the last in this category of what the training program should look like is it should be a rep scheme that, again, is optimal for muscle growth. And that has been shown to be in the 6 to 15 range. Maybe sometimes for small muscles in can go up to 20. But generally, if you narrow that down even further, it's typically going to be 8 to 12 reps in the 2 to 4 set range. So I have seen people do like, oh, I do 8 sets. And I'm like, okay, that's not going to be most effective for what we're trying to achieve here. And so there's so much more nuance to this, right? We're like, well, do I do 2 or do I do 4? Again, depends on the individual, depends on the experience, depends on how much time you have, and so many other factors. And then, again, same with the reps of how many reps we're doing. Again, usually depends, okay, what is the muscle group that we're working? How many other sets or exercises are we doing of that muscle group? What is this training and the intent of this training block based on the previous one and the next one? So it is more nuanced than that, but I'm giving you kind of high level here. And then there's other things to consider, like rest periods. How much rest are you taking in between each set? And then there's warm-ups, which you guys have heard me talk about a lot recently, of warming up for each exercise. And so that kind of gets more into execution, but I just want to call out the specific things that also are considered, especially as you advance more. One way to think about it is if you're new to all of this and you start doing one of these things, right? If you just start lifting it for the muscles you want to grow, you'll see progress there, right? But then once you build muscle, once you plateau, right, then you've got to add on the next thing. Or are you doing the right rep scheme? Then you've got to add on the next thing. And so I don't think of just like piecing it one by one. Just get the program that has everything in there so you're efficient and you don't waste time. Now, when it comes to execution, that takes time, that takes a skill, and that takes practice that you'll continue to evolve in. All right. What this is not. So I gave some examples of what it is, but what it is not is a burpee into a bicep curl into a shoulder press. I'm thinking that's probably like an Orange Theory move, I'm thinking. And again, if you think about someone who's just walking, if they go to Pilates, they'll probably see some progress. But then they're going to plateau really quickly. And then if they go from Pilates to Orange Theory, they'll probably see some progress. And if you keep going, keep adding some things, you'll see that progress. But again, I'm talking about what's most optimal, and let's get to that. So the reason why a burpee into a bicep curl into a shoulder press wouldn't be something that I would recommend if you're trying to grow muscle quickly is because every movement is taking from the other movement, where instead, like burpee is just going to be more cardio based, and then the bicep curl, well, you're limiting how much you're lifting there because you're doing a burpee before it, and then you are limiting how much you are doing on the shoulder press because you have to be able to curl it, and you could shoulder press a lot more. So you're not getting the full benefit there. Same thing with wall balls. So if you're doing 30, 50 wall balls, again, that is just one, you're not progressing in the weight, you're progressing in the reps, and you're going out of the ideal hypertrophy rep range. Another example is changing the exercises too frequently. And I do find this mainly when people are like, oh, we did this week and next week we're doing something different. I've seen this a lot with different personal trainers, and it's like a strategy to keep people engaged and excited, which some people, again, just need to have that baseline and work out. But if you're really serious about building and progressing, you want to be more optimal with that and repeat each week. Along that same line, the other thing that I see is changing the program so quickly. So a lot of programs, because you pay monthly, they feel like, well, we need to change the exercises monthly so that way they feel like they're getting something that they're paying for, even if it means not getting as much out of it. So that is also something that I see. And then lastly, I see a changing rep where it's like, oh, last week we did 8, but then this week we're doing 12, and then next week we're doing 6. Again, too many variables that doesn't allow you to progress from the previous week. Now, I didn't make this all up. This is the science that has told us, okay, this is what would be optimal. There are many progressive overload training programs out there. However, specific to my ladies in Create Your Shape, the difference is I'm very familiar with the equipment access that you guys have and the experience you guys have, but also the specific muscles that you tend to want to build. As I talked about, where we emphasize glutes and shoulders and then back and legs, where there may be some progressive overload training program out there and it's like, oh, this is great, but it emphasizes chest and quads and you're like in calves and you're like, wait a minute, this doesn't align with the shape that I want to build, and it has all this machines that I don't have access to. And so the Create Your Shape training program, which I didn't talk about this, but as far as days per week, generally 4 to 5 as far as how many days you are lifting per week. To maintain, I think 3 is good. I think it's more challenging to really progress on 3 unless you're maybe newer. And I think depending on the individual, that just may be where they're at and what they can do, and we make it work. But specifically, the Create Your Shape training program is 4 days of lifting and tailored to everything I just talked about, but also tailored and specific to my audience, my type of women. And then with my one-on-one coaching, I do custom training programs there. And again, the difference between this is it's just more custom and tailored, where I'll get photos of the equipment you have access to. And that way I can build out a program based on your specific goals and your specific shape and your specific experience levels, but also the equipment access that you have. Now, thinking about everything I just shared about a training program, someone can have a training program that checks all the boxes, but it is also not going to work unless they know how to execute it. So that's the next category I want to talk about, my philosophy when it comes to executing. The first thing is lifting heavy. Now, what does that mean? Because I do think it is different for everyone, but it's not as different as you think. And so I've heard people say before, like, oh, well, I don't lift like that. I don't do like the heavy lifts. And it's like, well, it doesn't matter, because what heavy lifting is within that rep scheme. So within that, typically like 8 to 12, you are getting close or to failure. So you're pushing the muscle until it's creating a stimulus to grow. And in order to do that, you've got to be close to failure. And so that's going to determine what weight you use. So if I told you, okay, you got to do shoulder presses for 10 reps, and you pick up the 5 pounds and you do 10 reps, but on the 10 reps, I'm like, don't go until or keep going until you can't go anymore. And then you end up doing 30. It's like, okay, well, we know that's way too light for you. We got to go a lot heavier. And it will take time to find your weights and weight selection and choosing your weights. That's a whole, again, more nuance on this. And you'll probably have questions on as you get into a new training program, as you get into any program, because that is important, but it's a skill and there's generally questions there. But overall, it's going to typically what females can lift for upper body, like shoulders and arms, is 10 to 40 pounds, really, in that range, maybe even more than that, but at least that. And then back is typically about 75% of your weight. So if I'm thinking, if you do like a pull down, right, and you weigh 100 pounds, then you would be doing around 70. Lower body is typically going to be like body weight and more. So for your glutes, there's such a strong muscle. But if you are just doing like a 10-pound weight, you're probably not going to grow your glutes, because you lift your body up every day, going up and down stairs more than that. So you'd be surprised, like someone like me, that I can do 200 to 300 pound hip thrust. And it's not just because I'm super strong, because relative to lots of females, I'm not on the higher end, but it doesn't matter, because I'm creating that stimulus to grow. Now, one of the biggest obstacles that I see ladies run into is a fear of lifting heavy, because they're afraid they're going to get hurt. I have been there. I know exactly what that feels like for every exercise. And that was something that I worked on for, really was like, okay, I'm doing this. I'm going to figure it out. And again, this is where it gets super nuanced, and where I like to have my ladies bring to me specifically what exercise, what's the feeling, because then we can work through that, because that's something that typically comes down to how you're executing it, your contraction with the muscle in the form. And I actually suggest pulling back on the weights until you get that confidence. But again, it's the execution takes practice, takes skill, takes review, takes like really getting in there to make that progress. But it has done wonders for me in my shape to figure that out. So again, this is part of the process when it's really like the skill and coaching through the execution of it. All right, next up is having the goal to progress every week. So this basically means tracking your weights, and then every week you don't go in and say, well, what do I feel like lifting today? What feels good? You go and you look at your from last week, because you're doing the same exercise in the same rep scheme, and you're saying, okay, I did 100 pounds last week for 10 reps. And so I either, the rep scheme is 10 to 12, so I need to get 11 this week, at least. And then once I get 12, then I can go up and weight, right? It's, again, progressing every week, which just makes it super fun. But that's how you can ensure, oh yeah, I know I'm building muscle, because I've got the data and the trends that show that I'm lifting heavier, I'm doing more reps, but still within that rep scheme. So tracking your weights, specifically like with my ladies, I have them track all of their weights for their training program, but the main muscle groups that they're working on for growth, they're submitting that to me, whether that's 3 or 5, And so that way I can also track the trends. And so when they're like, oh, I'm not making any progress, I can go in and say, yeah, because you haven't made progress in the gym in the last 6 weeks, right? We actually have that data to be able to track the trends. But I find once you see the data on your dashboard and you know it, it's very motivating to progress. All right, the last one is movement execution. And so this goes beyond just basic form. Generally, I find that my ladies like to work out and put them in any like fitness group class. They're going to be the shining star. But this is that next level. And I say that because that was me back in the day. I loved the group classes. I loved like, oh, I know how to do this. I'm so good. But then when I went to actually like, oh no, I want to actually build muscle now, I had to get way more fine-tuned than I was being. So this means like being able to isolate and contract the specific like muscle fibers that you're wanting to work. This is your bracing when you do a movement. This is your breathing. This is your angles. This is your, for example, I have somebody who wants to grow a shoulder cap, meaning they have that I look like I work out arms. And so we're doing lateral raises, cable lateral raises. But I watched their video and I can see that they are bending down and pulling it back up and just bringing their upper body down and bringing it up. And so they are not using and engaging the lateral delt, which is the muscle that we're trying to work and trying to grow to create that shoulder cap. So they are not getting as much out of this exact same exercise that someone else is doing and getting so much out of just because of that fine-tuned like execution. And it goes even beyond that, like with the little cues of, okay, it's not just telling someone that, but the cues of, oh, drive the shoulder down and out, keep the elbow slightly bent, but ideally like straight, and like all these little things. And it could be, oh, actually try this attachment. You're using the wrong attachment, or there's a better attachment for how you're doing it. So again, when I go into these like nuanced things, it also could be something like leg press. So I reviewed someone the other week where she's like, oh, it really bothers my knee. And so I watched how she was doing it, and I could see how her focus was pushing from the knees, and her knees were over her toes slightly, where we were doing this leg press for her glutes. So we actually wanted her feet to be higher, her knees to be parallel with her feet, but really the drive should be coming from the glutes. And that made all of the difference, not only for the injury and feeling it, but it's going to make the difference for how and where she grows muscle and how fast she grows that muscle. Breathing, that's a whole nother topic. So again, lots of nuance in here, but I want to emphasize that there's the training program, the philosophies around the training program, but then there's the philosophies around the execution. Those are skills that take practice, that take months to achieve. And so this is why you don't want to switch programs every month, because by the time you find your weights, that takes a couple weeks. By the time you like fine tune the actual movement, so you're contracting the muscle and it feels consistent every rep, and then you're progressing your weights and you're going to failure, and then you're like, that takes months. And so this is why generally you'll stay on a program from 4 to 8 months. There are reasons to change programs, mainly if you're not progressing, but that's also just a part of the philosophy. And the other part is generally this takes feedback, this takes like reviews, this takes progress, it takes questions, it takes getting answers, and it's not just something, oh, I have the training program now, I should be good. This is part of it. And that's also why I'm very big on emphasizing this part of it when I work with my ladies in Career Shape or in one-on-one, because it is not just, oh, I checked the box with a training program. This is part of it that we want to work through. We want to get and see the form review videos. I want to see what it looks like. I want to hear your questions, your hang-ups. Oh, I'm afraid of this. Okay, why? Let's get in there, because I get it. I've been there and I've worked through this myself. So I'm very familiar with all of it, and I'm also familiar with the benefits, not only for myself, but I see the ladies when it clicks. It's also just so much more fun, and you should truly feel like an athlete who is progressing, but we just want to make sure that you're progressing for the goals that you have. And lastly, with that, it doesn't mean that you have to do all of this perfectly to progress, or if you do have multiple goals, or it depends on your experience, all these things, right? It really is a little bit nuanced and a little bit more specific to you, your goals, and what you have going on. So if you are interested in building muscle, then definitely Create Your Shape or my one-on-one coaching is the place to be, which the next Create Your Shape starts in July. And I currently have a few spots open for one-on-one to start in June or July. So you can reach out to get started in any of those, and I'll see you next week on the Create Your Shape podcast.